What's going on, guys? CJ Curry here, back for Rise or Fall, and in this video we're going to be doing a position by position, game by game DraftKings and FanDuel breakdown for this Saturday's NFL Divisional playoff games. We've got two games on the slate, starting with the LA Rams at the Green Bay Packers, followed by the Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. The games start at 4:35 p.m. and the second game starts at 8:15 p.m. So we're going to get right into it, starting with the quarterback position. And really, guys, this is pretty simple for me. It comes down to just three guys that I'm really interested here. So Josh Allen kicking things off, Buffalo Bills versus the Ravens. As we talked about, his salary over on DraftKings, $7,400, $8,800 over on FanDuel. Currently, based on the Rise or Fall projection NFL Study Hub here, Josh Allen projected to be the highest scoring quarterback on the board for Saturday's games. Looks like he's projected for 24.41 points over on DraftKings, and over on FanDuel, he's projected for 23.46. So let's take a look real quick at Josh Allen and see how he's done in some of his recent games. We'll go over to DraftKings, open up the game logs real quick. His last game against the Colts, guys, he absolutely smashed 35.36 DraftKings points. To end the season, he played a limited amount of snaps there, 20.26 points, still lit everybody on fire in that game. And then the game before that, New England Patriots, he put up 35-40 in the game against Denver. So as you can see, the guy is on a complete tear right now. Truly an MVP candidate, in my opinion. So Josh Allen, a very, very strong option for this slate. The next guy up is Lamar Jackson. We saw him last week against Tennessee, had a pretty good game overall, really got it done on the ground with his legs, put in a very nice rushing performance, so that really boosts his numbers for that game. So Lamar Jackson facing off against Buffalo on the other side of the ball here from Josh Allen. He's the second highest projected quarterback, 21.96 points over on DraftKings. And then over on FanDuel, he's projected at 21.31 points. So we're going to pop into the game logs real quick for Lamar Jackson, see what we like, what we don't like here. And I mean, this guy's been pretty hot too. He started off the season kind of slow, but as you can see in his last few games, has really picked up the pace here as far as scoring. 28.76 points in his last one against Tennessee. Huge game for him. 25.22, 22.32, and 30.22 for Lamar Jackson. So that is a very strong way to go. He's priced $200 more than Josh Allen, however, so I don't like him as much, at least on DraftKings, in terms of point per dollar when we're looking at, trying to find the best value plays at a position. Lamar Jackson, probably not the way that I want to go, especially since he's priced over Josh Allen. But if we look at FanDuel here, we've got him at $800 cheaper versus Josh Allen. So you got to love that for Lamar Jackson. Nice little price difference there. But that brings us up to the third guy that I'm interested in rostering, although his matchup probably the toughest out of all of them. We know the LA Rams, they have the number one defense, but Green Bay, they have the number one offense. So very cool story there. Best offense versus best defense. So he's priced Aaron Rodgers at $6,900 over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's priced up at $8,400, making him the second most expensive quarterback on the board over on FanDuel. As we talked about, this is a tough matchup for him. The Rams rank number one in DVP. But if we look at his projections over on DraftKings, he's projected at 14.21 points. And then over on FanDuel, projected at 13.67. So let's get into the game logs real quick for Aaron Rodgers and see how he's done recently. As you may or may not know, he's lost his starting left tackle for the season, but that didn't seem to really impact him much against the Chicago Bears last week. Still putting up a very impressive 26 fantasy points over on DraftKings. Game before that against Tennessee, 26.14. Had a bit of a down game against Carolina there at 18. And then finally, Detroit back in week 14 put up almost 31 fantasy points. So some impressive game logs there from Aaron Rodgers. If we look at his price compared to the other guys above him, $6,900, which is fair. I would say is fair considering the matchup. Honestly, guys, if I'm picking between quarterbacks, it's either going to be Lamar Jackson or possibly Josh Allen here. But I think at $7,400 on DraftKings, Josh Allen is probably going to be the way that I go here. So let's go ahead and get into the next position here. Using my nifty little position filter, I can move over to running back quite easily over on the Rise or Fall NFL Study Hub. So as you can see here, running back isn't the prettiest this week. We got names like Devin Singletary, Aaron Jones, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins. But then it gets pretty ugly from there on, right? So we know that we have to at least pick a couple of these guys to put in our lineups over on DraftKings. So let's see if we can figure it out and land on some names that we feel good about. We'll start with Devin Singletary. He's currently projected to be the highest scoring running back on this Saturday NFL Divisional playoff game slate. He's projected at 13.77 points over on DraftKings, and on FanDuel projected at 11.99. You can get him for just $4,500 over on DraftKings and $5,700 over on FanDuel. So he's cheap, guys. I mean, he's not going to break the bank by any means, but none of these running backs have that big price tag this week, like Derrick Henry did last week, or an Alvin Kamara. So all of these guys are going to be $7,000 or less. So there shouldn't be too big of a strain on your budget of $50,000 over on DraftKings to pick, any two running backs that you feel most confident about. So let's start with Devin Singletary. Not a guy that we've probably rostered very much this season. At least I haven't. I didn't click on Devin Singletary's name a whole lot in DFS, nor did I draft him or start him in any of my season-long leagues. He's just not been a guy that has been a model of consistency. Here you can see in his last game against the Colts, really struggled, 7.4 points, 2.3 in the game before that against Miami. Going back to week 16 against New England, 7.2. Now, he did have a big week against Denver. That was all the way back in week 15. The Bills managed 48 points as a team, and Singletary was involved in that game, scoring a touchdown, ended up 17.4 was his final total. But as you can see here, guys, he averages just under 9 fantasy points per game. So keep your expectations low on Singletary. A lot of the times, this guy isn't going to put up any type of big monster performances for you. So let's move on to the next guy here, Aaron Jones. He is the second highest projected running back over on DraftKings this week. They've got him at 13.55 points, and he's projected for 11.87 points over on FanDuel. Aaron Jones probably going to be a popular pick if I were to guess, just based on name value alone. A lot of people, they're going to be hesitant to click on Devin Singletary. They're going to be hesitant to click on, a Gus Edwards or a Jamal Williams or, any of those guys. So you could probably expect Aaron Jones to be in a lot of lineups this week. Even though it's a tough matchup, I mean, the Rams, they rank 7th against running backs. You just got to figure that Aaron Jones is probably going to be a popular choice. He is $6,800, which puts him as the most expensive running back on the board for Green Bay. Let's look at the game logs real quick. He's been up or down. So 18.5 in his last game against the Bears. Pretty impressive. We know the Bears are a pretty tough defense most weeks. So that was a good game log for him there. Game before that, 12.8 against Tennessee. We go back to week 15 against the Carolina Panthers. Pretty big game, 27.8 points. Panthers all season long have been a team, though, that you can run against. So pretty soft matchup for Aaron Jones there. And then finally, against Detroit back in week 14, he put up 9.5 points against Detroit there. Good thing about Aaron Jones is that he does get involved in the passing game quite a bit. As you can see, he's always in the 3 to 5 target range, at least in his last few games, and converts on most of those targets, turning them into some pretty good yards. So Aaron Jones, a name that I expect a lot of people to be clicking on this weekend. The next guy up is the Los Angeles Rams rookie running back, Cam Akers. He's facing off against Green Bay, as we've mentioned. He's priced at $5,700 over on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, they've got him at $7,000, which makes him the second most expensive running back on the board behind the aforementioned Aaron Jones. This matchup, Not the easiest, but also not one that we're going to shy away from, especially since we've seen running backs gash the Green Bay Packers run defense on most weeks. So Cam Akers, as long as he's getting 20 plus touches like he has in most of the games where he's been the starter and has been healthy for this team, he's probably going to be a guy that we just have to lock into our lineups. But let's dig a little deeper and see where they have him projected this week. DraftKings, they have him projected 11.79 over on the Rise or Fall Study Hub. If you look at FanDuel, they've got him at 10.36. Let's take a look at some of his recent games and get an idea of how Cam Akers has been performing. His last one against Seattle, huge game, guys, and that's what we want to see from Cam Akers. 28 carries, 131 yards, a nice, healthy 4.7 yards per carry. Plus, the guy found the end zone, which he's done quite regularly since being named the starter. He also gets involved in the passing game. We've got 2 targets, 4 targets, 3 targets, 3 targets, and he converts. 2 receptions, 4 receptions. Little bit of a drop here, 1 reception on 3 targets, and then the game before that, 2 receptions on 3 targets. So I like this guy. I like him a lot. A couple of games before the last one against Seattle, Arizona, he struggled, but still getting the volume that we want to see, 20 plus carries from a running back. I love it. That's an auto play for me on most weeks. And then 15 the week before that. And we go back to the game against New England, 29 carries. So they're feeding this kid. They finally realized and have finally come to their senses and are seeing the light on Cam Akers. No more Malcolm Brown, no more Henderson. It's been the Cam Akers show for the last several weeks here. So I really like Cam Akers. I'm going to go ahead and plug him into the lineup there. But we're going to need another running back. Let's see if there's anybody else worth talking about. And there is. J.K. Dobbins, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. He's facing off against the Buffalo Bills. He's priced at $6,000 over on DraftKings, $6,500 over on FanDuel. His projections this week, according to our NFL Study Hub here, 11.34 points on DraftKings. And if we go over to FanDuel, he's projected at 10.29. So let's dig a little deeper on J.K. Dobbins. He is quite expensive on DraftKings, the second most expensive running back on the board. Even more expensive than Cam Akers, which is a little surprising. But there may be a good reason for that. His last game against Tennessee, not the greatest, 10.7 points, but he did find the end zone there, which you love to see. You know, it used to be in the past that Gus Edwards, we were worried about Gus the Bus vulturing touchdowns, or even Lamar Jackson vulturing touchdowns from J.K. Dobbins. It made us a little hesitant, made us quell our expectations when rostering a guy like J.K. Dobbins. But look, guys, he's been on a tear, finding the end zone in 4 straight games now. He got a total of 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games, so you love to see that. Not getting a lot of volume as far as rushing attempts go. He is involved somewhat in the passing game, but you'd like to see him get a few more looks. This team overall is a run-first team, guys, so you can't expect Lamar Jackson to throw 30, 40 passes a game. They're going to run it a lot, whether it be Lamar Jackson's legs, whether it be J.K. Dobbins' legs, whether it be Gus Edwards. They're going to keep the ball on the ground for the most part, attempting very, very few passes compared to a guy like a Josh Allen or an Aaron Rodgers. So there you have it with J.K. Dobbins. Anyone else worth talking about here? I mean, if you wanted to, you could look for a touchdown maybe from a Gus Edwards. Maybe he gets back on track, finds the end zone here. You know, you're basically touchdown hunting with a guy like that. He's not going to get you a ton of yards most weeks. Jamal Williams, he's got a role, but we've seen guys like A.J. Dillon also come out of nowhere and just have big games for the Green Bay Packers. So I don't know that I really want to touch any of these guys. Maybe at the very, very least, I go Gus Edwards, hoping that I find a touchdown. He should be low owned, and that could be a way in big tournaments and GPPs in order for you to get an edge, to get ahead against some of your competition in those large multi-entry format games. So I think that's going to be it for running back. Let's move on to wide receiver. Let's take a look and see. Obviously, we've already got Josh Allen in our lineup. The first name that should come to mind, who am I pairing with Josh Allen in a Buffalo Bills stack? Well, guys, I think it's a no-brainer. It's probably going to be Stefon Diggs, right? But let's filter out all positions on our Rise or Fall NFL Study Hub here and just look at wide receiver. And what do you know? Stefon Diggs, top of the heap, right? He's projected to be the most productive wide receiver on the slate. 18.97 DraftKings points for his projection there. 14.65 over on FanDuel. Of course, you get a little bit more points on DraftKings. You get bonuses. You get the full point per reception. So that's the difference there, in case you were wondering why there was a discrepancy in those projections. But this matchup against Baltimore, not the easiest, but hey, Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen, they seem to be matchup proof, right? I mean, I haven't really seen anybody really slow down that tandem all season long. He's priced at $7,300 over on DraftKings, $8,600 over on FanDuel. Let's dig in a little bit on Stefon Diggs. Surprisingly, not the most expensive receiver on the board. So anytime that I see a guy who's projected to be the highest scoring at his position, but isn't the highest priced, well, that screams value to me, and I want to lock him in my lineup. And it makes a lot of sense since we already have Josh Allen locked in there at quarterback. So let's look at his game logs. Been absolutely on fire. By far, Josh Allen's favorite receiver. 27.8 points last week against the Colts. 14.6 against the Dolphins. But again, Allen, Diggs, they did not play the full game, but still turned in a very impressive performance in limited playtime. If you go back to Week 16 against New England, 44.5 points against the Patriots. Just went totally nuclear there. And then going all the way back to Week 15 against Denver, 28.7 points. So guys, you got to love what you're seeing out of Stefon Diggs. We know he's going to get the targets 13, 11, 8, 9. We know he's going to get the yards. We love seeing the 100-plus yard games in his game log. We get the bonus, obviously 3 points anytime he goes over 100 yards. Well, he's done it in 3 of his last 4 games. Not only that, but he's got 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. So, no-brainer for me, guys. Averaging 22.2 points over on DraftKings. I'm locking Stefon Diggs in, and I'm going with the Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs stack. It worked out for me last weekend. I think it can work again this weekend, despite the somewhat difficult matchup against the Ravens. Let's move on, though. We got a bunch of other names to talk about at wide receiver, and the next guy that we must mention is Davante Adams. Green Bay Packers wide receiver facing off against the LA Rams. He's priced at $8,600 over on DraftKings, making him the most expensive receiver on the site, and $9,000 over on FanDuel, the most expensive wide receiver on FanDuel as well. But you don't always get what you pay for. In this case, he is the most expensive but not projected to be the highest scoring. As we mentioned, that honor goes to Stefon Diggs. But if we take a look here, he is projected for 17.09 points on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, projected for 13.3. Let's look at some recent games from Davante Adams, see if we could get a better idea here. His last few, 16.6, an okay game for Adams. You'd like to see a little bit more, 20 plus fantasy points would be nice. The game before that went absolutely insane. 46.2 points against the Tennessee Titans. Going back to Week 15 against Carolina, 11.2. And then finally against Detroit back in Week 14, 27.5 points. But if you look at his game logs here, obviously it's no secret. He's Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. 10 targets here, 10 targets here, 12 targets here, and 6 against Chicago. And, of course, he finds the end zone with great regularity as well, totaling 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games. So, he's expensive, guys, but he might just very well be worth it. This is kind of shaping up to be one of those situations where, you probably pay up at wide receiver, get a couple of the big names, a couple of the guys that are projected to see a ton of targets, a couple of the guys that you feel really good about. And with the way that pricing is working out at running back, you end up taking, cheaper running backs, hoping for the best. So that's kind of the way that I'm piecing together the roster construction so far. But let's keep going down the list here. We got Marquise Hollywood Brown, Baltimore Ravens receiver, facing off against Buffalo. Priced up at $5,200 over on DK on FanDuel. He's priced at $6,500. And if we take a look at his projections across the two sites here, he's projected for 13 points over on DraftKings and 10.47 points over on FanDuel. Let's look at Hollywood real quick. Much better performances out of Hollywood Brown in recent weeks. As you can see, his game logs echo what I just said. So 22.8 in his last game. Went over 100 yards, and he had 9 targets. So you love to see those targets are up now finally for Hollywood. And then the game before that against Cincinnati, 8 targets. Ended up going for just 41 yards, but made up for it with 2 touchdowns. He's been finding the end zone a lot here, guys. A lot recently. Go back to week 16 against the Giants. He was targeted just 4 times for 25 yards, but there you go again. Found the end zone to help bolster that final fantasy points total for him. And then finally, week 15 against the Jags, was targeted 7 times, hauled in 6 of them for 98 yards. Did not find the end zone in that one, but still put up a very respectable 15.8 fantasy points. So the production has been up for Hollywood Brown. I think this is a great way to go if you're playing Lamar Jackson and you need somebody to stack him with. Hollywood is a very practical choice to go with there in a 2-man Baltimore Ravens stack if that's what you want to do. Now, obviously, we've already got 2 pretty expensive receivers that we talked about. Davante Adams and Stefon Diggs. You know, I don't know that I want to pay up for Davante Adams, so I think actually I like Hollywood Brown as a bring-back piece for Baltimore, to get a piece of the Baltimore side of the ball. So you've got Josh Allen, you got Stefon Diggs. Let's go Hollywood and hope for the best there. Anybody else that we need to talk about? Well, let's keep moving down the list and see. We got Cole Beasley, another Bills receiver. He's priced at $4,900, $5,900 over on FanDuel. His projections this week, DraftKings has him 11.78, and FanDuel, they've got him at 9.24. So let's take a look at the game logs real quick on Mr. Cole Beasley. His last game, it was decent. You know, decent for a guy who's priced around that $4,000 or $5,000 range. Against the Colts, he had 12.7 fantasy points. Previous game, only 4.7 against the Patriots. We go back to week 15 against Denver, 22.2. And then finally, Pittsburgh, 9.1. But as you can see, guys, he gets a pretty healthy amount of targets most weeks. 10, 5, 7. We'd like to see him turn some more of these targets into production, though. These 10 targets against Pittsburgh, only caught 5 of them. And then, the one here where he's only got 5 targets, you'd like to see him maybe go like 5 for 5 if he's going to get just 5 targets in a game. So he's been a bit up or down. Hard to project, hard to predict what he's going to do, especially when you consider that John Brown's healthy. He's back in the lineup. Plus, you got the emergence of Gabriel Davis, who's another guy that you can take a look at if you want another piece of this Buffalo Bills passing game. Gabriel Davis is another cheap option for you. Made some highlight reel grabs in his first playoff appearance. So really like Gabriel Davis. Let's talk the Rams. We haven't really discussed anybody from the Rams yet other than Cam Akers. But we got Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp on the board. Obviously, Jared Goff, he's in there. He's playing with a bum thumb. Kind of makes you a little bit worried about rostering any of these Rams receivers. Just not quite sure what to expect out of Jared Goff. Played decent, I guess, given the circumstances last week, coming off of a recent thumb surgery. But Robert Woods, first guy up, $5,900 over on DraftKings, $6,600 over on FanDuel. Looking at his projections on both sites, 10.67 for DraftKings and 8.44 over on FanDuel. Digging in a little deeper here on Woods, he's $5,900, which makes him the 3rd most expensive receiver over on DraftKings. Cracking open the game logs real quick on Woods to see how he's done in recent weeks. Not very impressive. I mean, 14.5 points in his last game. That was against Seattle. Was targeted 8 times, hauled in 4 of them, and did find the end zone, which really helped save his day. But the game before that, targeted just 7 times, only hauled in 4. Targeted 9, hauled in 4. So not very efficient. He is getting some pretty good targets, but he's not really doing much with them. As you can see, yardage totals pretty low for Woods as well. So you're hoping with a guy like this that he's going to be able to find the end zone here. That's going to be, the saving grace, it looks like, for Robert Woods based on his last few games. But I see this game possibly being low scoring, depending on if the Rams can slow down the Packers passing attack. This could be a very run heavy type of game. I haven't really seen anyone slow down Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, Robert Tonyan and company. So I don't know. You got to kind of put together a game script in your mind. How is this Rams Packers game going to go? How do you see it playing out? Is Green Bay going to have enough offensive firepower to overpower the Rams defense and build a lead here and force the Rams into abandoning the run game and passing the ball more? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But let's see who else we have on the board here. Cooper Kupp, we'll talk about him real quick. Kupp, I believe he left last week's game early. Let's take a look at the news real quick. Kupp with a knee issue is listed as questionable for Sunday's playoff game. So guys, real simple here. If Cooper Kupp doesn't play for any reason, there's two guys that you should be looking at on the Rams as far as wide receivers go that could save you some salary and would have tremendous upside. One being Reynolds, the other being Van Jefferson. So Josh Reynolds, Van Jefferson, very cheap options. Reynolds, super cheap here, just $3,200. Great way to save some money. And then Jefferson, even cheaper, min price, $3,000. So if Cooper Kupp misses, guys, you got to get those guys in your lineup to save some money over on this slate. But let's just pretend that Cooper Kupp's going to make it. He's going to get in the game and play. His last few games, 11.8, 14.6, 8.9, and 14.3. He gets pretty regular targets here, between 5 and 9 in his last few games, as you can see, but also not going to be a guy who's going to hit 100-plus yards in most games and really doesn't find the end zone very, very often, very regularly. So 1 touchdown in his last 4 games. So Cooper Kupp's more of a PPR guy, which, is great over on DraftKings, but he's just not having a very efficient season either, at least of late. I should say his last game wasn't very efficient. The other one's 8 for 9 here, 5 for 5, 5 for 5. So that's what you can kind of expect for Cooper Kupp if he is out on the field. He's been averaging about 14.4 DraftKings points per game. So don't think I want to touch Cooper Kupp. We've already mentioned John Brown. We've already talked Davis. Maybe, look at one of these other Green Bay Packers guys. Is Allen Lazard worth taking a look at? Well, we could check into his game logs real quick and see what he's done. Since Lazard came back from that core muscle injury, he started off the season super hot, right? He was looking like a true number 2 option opposite Davante Adams. Had the core muscle injury, missed some time, came back, hasn't really been what he was to start the season. You got to wonder if that injury, that surgery, is still lingering and maybe slowing Allen Lazard down some in his last few games here. 3.7, 3.4, 10.6, 3.9. So I don't know. I don't like it. It's ugly. I don't really trust the guy. Could he catch a touchdown? Sure, he's a big-bodied receiver. He could pull one in here. But, do you feel comfortable with that? Touchdown hunting at wide receiver? Maybe. But I think there's better places to go. So I think that's going to wrap it up for receiver, though. Let's take a look at the next position, which is tight end. We got some pretty good tight ends on the board here, starting with Mark Andrews, the Baltimore Ravens big man. He's projected at $5,000 over on DraftKings, $6,600 over on FanDuel. Green Bay, not the toughest matchup when it comes to covering tight ends. DraftKings, he's projected for 14.03 points on DraftKings and 11.33 points over on FanDuel. Let's look at Mr. Mark Andrews and his recent games. Opening up the game log here, his last game against Tennessee, not a great one. 8.1 points, kind of ho-hum. You expect a lot more when you pay $5,000+ for a tight end. Game before that, also not very impressive. 6.7 against Tennessee. And then the previous 2 games, 13.6 against the Giants and 17.6 against Jacksonville. If we could get that type of performance out of Mark Andrews in this game, well, that would be awesome. He's averaging 11.9 fantasy points per game over on DraftKings, and he gets some pretty regular targets from Lamar Jackson, one of Lamar Jackson's favorite weapons, both Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews. So I don't think I want to pay up for Mark Andrews this week against Buffalo. Let's look at the next guy, Robert Tonyan, $800 cheaper than Andrews. Very similar game logs if you look at the two guys side by side. I mean, you're getting almost the same type of production, and actually Tonyan's been more of a touchdown target. As you can see, he's got 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games. The last game he played was against the Bears, 9.8 points. Bit of a downer here, 2.7 against Tennessee, but then you go back to Carolina and Detroit, 10.8, 14.6 in those games. He's not somebody who's going to be targeted heavily in this offense, guys. It's just not the case for Tonyan most weeks. But where he does help you out is in the red zone. So that's what you're paying for. Looking for a touchdown from Robert Tonyan. And then it falls off from there, guys. From Mark Andrews and Tonyan, you're dropping down to guys like Dawson Knox, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett. I don't feel great about any of these guys. I'll be truthful with you. If you do pick any of them up, you got to be looking for a touchdown from one of them. But we're going to dig in a little deeper here because really our options are quite limited when you're talking about only 4 teams on this slate. So we got to find somebody. Well, if you're looking for touchdowns, Dawson Knox might be your guy. In his last 4 games here, he has found the end zone twice. Not typically targeted heavily, but has shown in the past that he can be targeted heavily. He was targeted 8 times against Miami. Only hauled in 2 of those, though. Most weeks, though, 3 to 4 targets seems more realistic for Knox. He's not a big-time yardage guy. Again, this is going to be a guy you just hope and pray that you plug him in there at $3,100 and he finds the end zone for you, which is a real possibility here. He could definitely score a touchdown. Now, 2 other guys that may be a little bit more interesting, I guess, if Cooper Kupp is out, maybe Tyler Higbee or Gerald Everett step up for the Rams. Let's look at Higbee's last game. He's priced at $3,000 on DraftKings. Another guy who's just going to see a handful of targets most games. Doesn't do a whole lot with them. 30, 40, maybe 50, 60 yards on a good day. Has found the end zone once in his last 4 outings. But if you look at these totals, it's just ugly. 1.4 in his last one, 7.1, 6.4, and then a big 16.7 back in week 15 against the Jets. But that's one way to go. Gerald Everett, quick look at his game logs. Just 1 target in his last game. You hate to see that. Previous games, though, 7 targets here, 3, 5. Doesn't really equate to very many fantasy points, though, so I don't feel comfortable about Gerald Everett unless you just have a hunch, a feeling that somehow, some way he finds the end zone and picks you up some easy points that way. But that's about it for tight end. I think you kind of get the gist of it. You got 2 guys that really stand out, and then you've got a bunch of other guys that you can plug in there for cheap and hope for a touchdown. But don't hold your breath. It may not happen. Finally, last but not least, defense. Where are we going on defense? Well, you can see here, guys, 3 out of the 4 defenses on the board are priced below $3,000 on DraftKings. If we look over on FanDuel, got to show FanDuel a little love, right? Kind of the same situation, right? Green Bay's priced up higher than the other 3. So $4,600 for Green Bay over on FanDuel. Got Buffalo at $4,000. Rams and Ravens down there, $3,800, $3,600. Let's take a look at the NFL Study Hub back on teamriserfall.com. They also seem to favor the Green Bay Packers. Packers are projected to be the highest scoring defense, 7.41 points on DraftKings and 7.41 points over on FanDuel. So some consistency there between the 2 sites. So Green Bay against the Rams, I mean, obviously we talked about it. We don't really trust Jared Goff. We don't really trust his thumb. He had surgery on that thumb recently. This could be a game where Jared Goff struggles. If we look at Goff real quick in his last game, only attempted 19 passes, and for good reason. The guy's playing with a hurt thumb, but completed just 9 of those passes, 155 yards and a touchdown. So that led to just 10.6 fantasy points. Green Bay is the favorite to win this game. And if you believe their offense puts up big points, well, that means Jared Goff's going to have to drop back and throw the ball. When quarterbacks drop back, That leads to opportunities for sacks, for fumbles, for interceptions. So it makes a lot of sense for Green Bay to be the most expensive defense on the board. Question is, once you lock in the rest of your lineup, how much money are you going to have left to spend on a defense? Normally, we like to spend down at defense, at least I do. Like to spend down at tight end, maybe find a cheap wide receiver or two. But in this case, yeah, I mean, you want Green Bay and the potential for a big game, well, you're going to have to pay up at $3,900. So if we lock them in, you can see here that it leaves you with just over $5,100 for an average remaining player. So, $5,100, you can maybe find a running back, a receiver, a tight end, and a flex here and kind of flesh out the rest of your lineup. But those are some decisions that you're going to have to make. But if we're not going Green Bay, who are we going with? If we're paying down and we want to go cheap, well, what do we like? I can't say I love the Ravens. They've been a good defense, but man, you're facing Josh Allen. You're facing Stefon Diggs. We know in the past, Josh Allen has had those games where he's just completely blown up, but he seems to be over that, right? He seems to be like a guy who's kind of turned over a new leaf, playing with this unbelievable moxie, this unbelievable confidence. I don't feel real good about taking the Ravens against him. Buffalo, I mean, maybe Lamar Jackson comes out and struggles. He's had his struggles in the past as well. If they can kind of contain him and his ability to use his legs and turn him into a pass-first type of guy, maybe some things can work out there for the Bills. I kind of like them. If you don't want to pay up for the Packers and you want to pay down at defense, I don't mind taking the Bills, hoping that game script works out to where Buffalo is able to put up some big points, build a big lead against the Ravens, and then Lamar Jackson has to turn into a pass-first type of quarterback, throw the ball in the air and stuff. Maybe that leads to some opportunities for this Bills defense. But those are probably the two options that I'm looking at. Paying all the way up for the Packers or paying down and taking the Bills. Not really feeling good about the Ravens versus the high-powered Bills offense. Same goes for the Rams. I mean, they've been a really good defense, but Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams and this Green Bay Packers offense has also been a really, really good offense. So you got to kind of pick your poison there and figure out where you want to go at defense. But I think that's going to do it for this video. We are going to be releasing another video, so stay tuned for that. That one's going to cover the Sunday NFL Divisional playoff games for both DraftKings and FanDuel. So if you haven't been to Team Rise or Fall yet, go to teamriserfall.com. Check out what they've got going on here. I'll let you take a quick look. Everything from cheat sheets, everything to the NFL Study Hub that I just showed you. A totally free to join Discord chat. Not only that, but they're constantly posting stuff out there on Twitter. So if you're not a part of the Rise or Fall family yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go check them out today. That's going to do it for me. This has been CJ for Rise or Fall. Good luck this Saturday. I hope you win some money. Until the next one, we'll see ya.